She sent her son to take out the trash, but just 5 minutes later, his dog came back alone, bleeding and terrified. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Jennifer Wilson adjusted the wall clock with a sigh, her tired eyes drifting to the scattered bills on the kitchen table. Overdue electricity, mortgage warning, final notice for cable. The cream-colored paper seemed to glow accusingly in the fading evening light. 5 weeks unemployed. The severance package from the accounting firm had barely covered last month's expenses. She opened the small pill bottle beside her coffee mug, extracted one antidepressant tablet, and methodically broke it in half. The doctor wouldn't approve, but the insurance had lapsed, and the medication needed to last. "Half is better than nothing," she muttered, swallowing it with lukewarm coffee. A nauseating smell from the overflowing kitchen trash made her wince. One more task in a day filled with job applications that vanished into the digital void. "Ethan, honey," she called, running fingers through her disheveled brown hair. "Can you take the garbage out before bed?" Her 10-year-old son nodded without looking up from his math homework at the kitchen table, his pencil moving in careful concentration. His blue t-shirt had a small ketchup stain from dinner, spaghetti made with the last of the ground beef. Beside him, Scruffy, their small white terrier, perked up at the word "out," his tail thumping enthusiastically against the linoleum floor. Jennifer watched through the kitchen window as Ethan dragged the garbage bag along the gravel path toward the rural road. His small body was illuminated only by the crescent moon and the weak light from a distant street lamp. The darkness seemed to swallow him step by step. Something twisted in her stomach, a strange pang of apprehension as his silhouette grew smaller. She shook her head. "It's only 60 feet to the trash can, Jennifer. Stop being overprotective," she whispered to herself, turning back to the bills. Perhaps if she rearranged them by due date instead of amount, they'd seem less overwhelming. She drew red circles around payment minimums, calculating what could wait another week. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silent house. 1 minute passed. 2. 3. At exactly 4 minutes, the sound of frantic nails scratching at the back door froze her blood. Jennifer dropped her pen. Something was wrong. Scruffy had followed Ethan out, he always did, but the boy hadn't returned. The dog would never leave his side. She flung the door open. Scruffy stumbled inside, whimpering uncontrollably. Bright red blood matted his white fur, his entire body trembling as he collapsed on the kitchen floor. "Ethan! Ethan!" Jennifer screamed, running outside barefoot, heart hammering against her ribs. The gravel bit into her feet as she raced toward the road. The garbage can lay overturned, its contents spilled across the shoulder. Fast food wrappers, coffee grounds, and junk mail scattered in the gentle evening breeze. No sign of her son. "Ethan!" Her voice echoed across the empty fields, answered only by the distant sound of a barking farm dog. Jennifer spun in circles, panic rising like bile in her throat. 20 feet down the roadside ditch, something blue caught her eye. Ethan's t-shirt. Torn, discarded in the tall grass. She clutched it to her chest, her bare feet now bleeding from the sharp gravel as she stumbled back toward the house to call 911, her mind refusing to process what her eyes had seen. Sheriff Carter arrived 15 minutes later, his cruiser's lights painting the rural home in alternating red and blue. Jennifer sat on the porch steps, Scruffy bandaged with kitchen towels in her lap, clutching her son's torn shirt like a lifeline. "We found fresh tire tracks on the shoulder, Mrs. Wilson," he said, his weathered face grim beneath the flashlight beam. "And we need to talk about the blood on the gravel." Jennifer stared blankly at the small crimson spots illuminated in the light. Scruffy's blood? Ethan's? She couldn't make herself ask. More patrol cars arrived. Deputies with flashlights began methodically searching the roadside ditch. Neighbors in pajamas and hastily thrown-on jackets gathered at the perimeter, forming impromptu search teams. "He was just taking out the trash," Jennifer repeated numbly to the female deputy taking her statement. "It was only for a minute." As search teams organized and police radios crackled with coordinates, Robert Miller appeared silently beside Jennifer, offering a steaming mug of coffee. The taciturn war veteran lived half a mile down the road in a small, meticulously maintained house. In 3 years, they'd exchanged perhaps 20 words total. "Thought you could use this," he said quietly, his voice rough from disuse. His eyes, deep-set beneath a creased forehead, watched the search patterns with professional assessment. "Thank you," Jennifer whispered, the warmth of the mug failing to reach her frozen core. Robert didn't leave. Instead, he pulled out his phone, thumb swiping to the gallery. "I saw a dark blue car parked down the road around 8:30, he said, showing her a photo of a vehicle partially visible between trees. "Not from around here." Jennifer's hands shook violently, sloshing coffee onto her skin. "Ethan disappeared at exactly that time." Sheriff Carter frowned, overhearing the conversation. "Mr. Miller, why didn't you mention this earlier?" His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "And why were you photographing random cars at night?" Robert's expression hardened. "I was about to head into town when I noticed it. Something seemed off. No lights, parked at an odd angle away from houses. I photograph anything suspicious since those break-ins last summer." Before Robert could continue, the local veterinarian's truck pulled into the driveway. Dr. Lowenstein had responded to Jennifer's frantic call about Scruffy while waiting for the police. The elderly vet examined the terrier gently in the back of his vehicle. "The cuts aren't deep, but he's in shock," he explained, administering an injection. "Whatever happened out there frightened him badly." As if understanding he was being discussed, Scruffy suddenly lifted his head, ears alert. A low growl rumbled in his chest. In one fluid motion, the small dog leaped from the veterinarian's grip and out of the truck, his bandages flapping as he raced toward the dense forest bordering the property. "Scruffy, no!" Jennifer shouted, but the dog disappeared into the darkness, barking frantically. "He's found something!" Jennifer cried, already running after the dog. The forest edge loomed ahead, an impenetrable wall of black beyond the searchlights. "Mrs. Wilson, wait!" Sheriff Carter called. "We need to coordinate proper search teams. The woods aren't safe at night." Jennifer heard nothing, but the blood pounding in her ears and the fading sound of Scruffy's barks. Her bare feet hit the soft earth of the forest edge, twigs and pine needles replacing the gravel's sharp pain. Behind her, flashlight beams frantically swept the ground, officers shouting for her to stop. But Jennifer couldn't stop. Somewhere in that darkness was her son, and somehow she knew Scruffy was leading her to him. She plunged into the forest, ignoring the officers' shouts, feeling that the wounded dog was her only connection to her missing son. The darkness of the forest swallowed Jennifer whole as she stumbled between twisted tree trunks, her bare feet finding every sharp stone and broken branch. Scruffy's frantic barking grew fainter ahead of her, a ghostly beacon fading into the night. "Ethan!" she screamed, her voice breaking. "Scruffy, come back!" Flashlight beams danced chaotically behind her as officers entered the woods. Their calls for her to stop grew distant as Jennifer pushed deeper into the tangled undergrowth, guided only by moonlight filtering through the canopy and the increasingly faint sound of her dog. "Ma'am, please stop," a young deputy's voice echoed between the trees. "We need to search systematically." Jennifer ignored him, heart pounding as she scrambled up a small embankment. Her foot caught on an exposed root, sending her sprawling into a patch of thorny brambles. Pain laced across her arms as she pushed herself up, disoriented now that Scruffy's barking had gone silent. "Scruffy!" she called, turning in a desperate circle. "Where are you, boy?" Nothing answered but the chirping of crickets and the distant hooting of an owl. The small white dog had vanished completely into the darkness, leaving Jennifer alone and lost among the trees. Mrs. Wilson! Sheriff Carter's authoritative voice cut through the night as his flashlight beam found her. You need to come back with us. We have search teams assembling with proper equipment. But Scruffy was leading us somewhere, Jennifer protested, her voice trembling. He knows something about Ethan. I can feel it. The sheriff's weathered face softened with compassion, but remained firm. We have tracking dogs coming from the county. Professional handlers. Let them do their job. He gestured to her bleeding arms and feet. And you need medical attention. I can't just leave him out here, Jennifer whispered, tears streaming down her face. We won't stop looking, Sheriff Carter promised, carefully guiding her back toward the tree line. Not for a minute. But you running blindly through these woods isn't helping Ethan. Jennifer allowed herself to be led back, each step away from the forest feeling like a betrayal. The search was expanding now, more vehicles arriving, radios crackling with coordinates, volunteers from neighboring properties gathering with flashlights and determined expressions. I'll stay with her, Robert Miller said quietly as the sheriff handed Jennifer over to a waiting paramedic. You coordinate the search parties. The sheriff nodded, casting one final assessing look at Robert before turning to organize the growing crowd of searchers. The first rays of dawn painted the eastern sky in pale pink and gold as Jennifer sat wrapped in a shock blanket on her porch, watching helicopters circling overhead. Her cuts had been cleaned and bandaged, but nothing could touch the hollow ache inside her chest. 12 hours had passed with no sign of Ethan. Search teams had combed the woods all night, their flashlights moving like fireflies through the darkness. Now, with daylight breaking, the search expanded to include the fields beyond the forest and the network of country roads nearby. You need to rest, Mrs. Wilson, insisted the paramedic who had remained on scene, offering her a fresh thermal blanket. You won't help your son by collapsing from exhaustion. He's out there somewhere, bleeding and alone, Jennifer whispered, her voice raw from hours of calling Ethan's name. And we're only 12 hours from his disappearance. If we wait any longer... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Everyone knew the grim statistics about missing children and time. A young deputy approached with a paper cup of fresh coffee. The K-9 units are here from the state police, he reported. They're starting at the point where your dog disappeared into the woods. Jennifer nodded mechanically, her eyes fixed on the tree line where Scruffy had vanished. The small dog had not returned either, adding another layer to her mounting grief. Her cell phone rang suddenly, startling her so badly she nearly dropped the coffee. Unknown number. With trembling hands, she answered and pressed the phone to her ear. At first, there was only heavy breathing on the line. Then a sound that brought Jennifer to her knees in the dirt of her front yard. Ethan's muffled cry, distant but unmistakable. Ethan! Ethan! Can you hear me? Where are you? She screamed into the phone. Sheriff Carter turned sharply at her cry, rushing toward her with the police tech specialist in tow. The breathing continued, but Ethan's voice didn't come again. Please, Jennifer begged, clutching the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. He's only 10 years old. What do you want? Money? I'll do anything. The call ended abruptly, leaving nothing but silence. The police tech took her phone immediately, connecting it to equipment in his van. We'll try to trace it, he said, typing rapidly on his laptop. But it's bouncing between 3 different towers. Impossible to triangulate precisely. Could you tell anything about where he might be? Sheriff Carter asked gently. Any background noises, clues? Jennifer shook her head, struggling to contain her mounting panic. Just his cry. He sounded scared, but not hurt. Not... She couldn't bring herself to say, not dead. As the tech worked frantically to extract data from the call, a commotion at the edge of the property drew their attention. Several officers were pointing toward the field, where a small white shape was emerging from the tall grass. Scruffy! Jennifer gasped, jumping to her feet. The terrier appeared exhausted, panting heavily and covered in mud, but miraculously free of new injuries. As he approached, Jennifer noticed something unusual. Tied to his collar was a small piece of blue fabric. "That's from Ethan's shirt," she whispered, as she knelt to examine it. The same shade of blue as the torn t-shirt she'd found in the ditch. Robert Miller, who had stayed through the night helping search teams, approached silently and crouched beside her. "He's trying to show us something," he said softly, his eyes focused on the scrap of fabric. "I've seen military dogs do this. He knows where Ethan is." Sheriff Carter stepped between them, his expression suddenly guarded. "Mr. Miller, I need you to come to the station to answer some questions." His hand rested casually near his holster. "We have witnesses saying you've been observed watching children playing in the town park." Jennifer looked up sharply, shock written across her exhausted features. Robert's face hardened. "I'm trying to help," he said firmly. "I lost my own son 3 years ago to an abductor. I know what this woman is going through." The revelation hung in the air for a moment, but before anyone could respond, the sheriff's radio crackled to life. Possible sighting of a boy matching the description at the convenience store on Highway 16, 8 miles east. Security cameras show a man forcing a child into a blue car approximately 20 minutes ago. "That could be him!" Jennifer exclaimed, already running toward the sheriff's vehicle. "We need to go now." Sheriff Carter hesitated, looking between Jennifer and Robert, then nodded. "Stay here," he ordered Robert, before escorting Jennifer to his patrol car. They drove at breakneck speed, sirens wailing. Jennifer's heart pounded painfully in her chest as hope and terror battled within her. Was it Ethan? Was he alive? Injured? The convenience store appeared around a bend, its parking lot filled with patrol cars. But the hope crumbled quickly. The security footage showed a boy with the same build and hair color as Ethan, but when played back, it clearly wasn't him. Just another similar-looking boy with his father, who had grabbed his arm when the child tried to run back inside for candy. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Wilson," the sheriff said gently as they drove back to her house. "We'll keep investigating every lead." Jennifer stared blankly out the window, the brief surge of hope making the crash back to reality even more painful. "He's still out there," she whispered. "I know he is." Back at the Wilson home, Jennifer insisted on going inside alone, despite the sheriff's concerns. "I need to change clothes and just breathe for a moment," she explained, though in truth, she needed to escape the pitying glances and whispered conversations. "I'll be right outside," Sheriff Carter assured her. "We're setting up a command center in your yard. The FBI has been notified and agents are en route." Jennifer nodded mechanically and stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The house felt unnaturally quiet without Ethan's constant movement and chatter. Scruffy had been left with the local vet for observation, though the dog had seemed desperately reluctant to leave Jennifer's side. Moving through the silent kitchen, Jennifer noticed the back door standing ajar, though she was certain it had been closed when she'd run out looking for Ethan. A cold feeling washed over her, distinct from her grief. Someone had been inside while she was gone. Cautiously, she moved through the house, checking rooms with growing dread. Nothing seemed disturbed or taken. Not the old television, not her laptop, not even the small emergency cash envelope in the kitchen drawer. When she reached Ethan's bedroom, she froze in the doorway. The room appeared untouched, dinosaur models on shelves, solar system mobile hanging from the ceiling, except for one detail that made her blood run cold. The bed had been carefully made, the dinosaur comforter smoothed with military precision, and placed precisely in the center of Ethan's pillow was his favorite digital watch, the face cracked and the display frozen at 8:37, exactly the moment of his disappearance. Jennifer stood frozen, holding the broken watch in her trembling hands, understanding that someone had been in her home during her absence, someone who knew the exact moment when Ethan disappeared. Jennifer clutched the broken watch as she sprinted from Ethan's bedroom, her heart hammering wildly. The intruder had been here, in her home, in her son's room, while she was searching for him. The violation sent ice through her veins. "Sheriff," she called, bursting through the front door. "Someone was in my house." Sheriff Carter took the shattered watch from her trembling hands, examining it with narrowed eyes. "Frozen at the exact time he disappeared," he murmured. "This wasn't here when we did the initial sweep." "No," Jennifer shook her head vehemently. "It was on his wrist when he went outside. Someone took it from him and placed it on his pillow while we were all searching." The sheriff immediately dispatched deputies to process the house for evidence. Within an hour, Jennifer's quiet rural home had transformed into a buzzing hive of law enforcement activity. Technicians dusted for fingerprints while uniformed officers examined doors and windows for signs of forced entry. In the kitchen, agents wheeled in sophisticated equipment, transforming her worn oak table into a command center. Laptops, radio equipment, and maps of the county spread across the surface where Ethan had been doing his math homework just last night. Special Agent Diana Reeves from the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team took over coordination, her sharp eyes missing nothing as she interviewed Jennifer again. "If he's out there in this weather..." Agent Reeves glanced toward the window where raindrops had begun to spatter against the glass. The temperature had plummeted throughout the day, and weather reports warned of an approaching storm system. Jennifer caught the unspoken implication in the agent's hesitation. If Ethan was exposed to the elements, injured and alone, his chances dimmed with each passing hour. The 36-hour mark loomed ominously, the critical window when statistics turned grimly against finding missing children alive. A crack of thunder punctuated the silence, making Jennifer flinch. Rain began hammering the roof as the storm arrived in full force. The search teams would be struggling now, visibility dropping to near zero in the deluge. She curled on the living room sofa with Scruffy nestled against her side. The terrier had returned from the vet an hour ago, refusing to leave Jennifer even to eat. His watchful eyes remained fixed on the door, ears twitching at every sound. The television murmured in the background, local news stations showing Ethan's school photo, his gap-toothed smile from his last birthday, eyes bright and innocent. The anchor's solemn voice reported on the developing situation, as if her son's life could be condensed into a 2-minute segment between weather and sports. The front door opened, bringing a gust of rain-chilled air. Robert Miller stepped inside, water streaming from his jacket. He'd been released after questioning, his story checking out. The car he had photographed had been spotted by other witnesses, and his alibi for the previous evening, a therapy group for grieving parents, had been confirmed. "Any news?" he asked quietly, removing his dripping coat. Jennifer shook her head, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Robert crossed the room and sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Jennifer," he said softly, "Scruffy is trying to tell us something. I've seen military dogs do this before. He knows where Ethan is." An FBI agent monitoring communications nearby looked up with a frown. "We already followed the dog once. Led us nowhere. We're following established protocols for..." "Your protocols aren't working," Jennifer snapped, suddenly on her feet. "What if this wasn't a kidnapping? What if he ran from someone and he's hiding? Scruffy was with him." As if responding to her words, the terrier leaped from the sofa and raced to the window, barking frantically toward the forest, where rain lashed the trees into frenzied motion. "He's been doing that all day," one of the deputies remarked dismissively. "Dogs get worked up during storms." Robert studied Scruffy's behavior with narrowed eyes. "That's not fear of thunder. Look at his posture. He's alerting to something specific." He grabbed a waterproof flashlight from his pocket. "I'm going with you," he told Jennifer firmly. The FBI agents protested immediately. Agent Reeves stepped forward, her expression stern. "Mrs. Wilson, I understand your frustration, but Venturing out in this storm is dangerous and could hamper our professional search efforts. My son is out there." Jennifer's voice cracked as she grabbed her raincoat. "Your professional efforts haven't found him, and I trust this dog more than your statistics right now." Without waiting for further objections, Jennifer opened the door. Scruffy bolted outside, undeterred by the downpour. Despite the agent's continued protests, Jennifer plunged after him into the storm, Robert at her heels. The rain struck like needles against her face as she followed Scruffy's white form through the curtain of water. The dog moved with purpose, taking a different route than the previous night. Steeper, more treacherous terrain that led away from the areas already searched. "He's leading us somewhere specific," Robert called over the howling wind, his flashlight beam struggling to penetrate the sheets of rain. Jennifer's shoes slipped in the mud as they climbed a ridge she'd never fully explored, despite living here for years. Her lungs burned with exertion, but determination pushed her forward. Every instinct told her Scruffy knew something the searchers had missed. Nearly an hour into their desperate trek, soaked to the skin and gasping for breath, Jennifer noticed Scruffy had stopped. The dog stood rigid at the edge of what appeared to be an unremarkable section of forest, sniffing the air and whining. "What is it, boy?" Jennifer approached, using Robert's flashlight to examine the area. Scruffy paced back and forth along the edge of what they now realized was a steep ravine, partially obscured by dense underbrush. Without the dog's guidance, they would have walked right past it, or worse, fallen in. "Ethan!" Jennifer screamed, her voice nearly inaudible beneath the raging storm. A moment passed. Nothing. Then, faintly, a weak moan responded from below. "There!" Robert shouted, directing the flashlight beam downward. The light revealed a treacherous slope leading to a rocky bottom some 30 feet below. Jennifer's heart stopped when the beam illuminated a splash of blue fabric. "Ethan!" she screamed, already scrambling toward the edge. Robert caught her arm. "Wait. You'll slide all the way down in this mud. Let me secure a rope." Using his belt and Jennifer's raincoat ties, Robert fashioned a makeshift safety line. Carefully, they began descending the slippery slope, sliding frequently in the mud but managing to control their descent using exposed roots and rocks. At the bottom of the ravine, Jennifer's breath caught in her throat. There, huddled beneath a small, rocky overhang that had partially sheltered him from the rain, lay Ethan. His face was deathly pale, his clothes soaked and muddied, but his chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. "Ethan, baby, I'm here," Jennifer sobbed, cradling his cold face between her hands. His eyelids fluttered. "Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Jennifer pulled him against her chest, trying to transfer any warmth from her body to his. "You're safe now. I've got you." Robert was already on his emergency radio, calling in their location. "We need immediate medical assistance. We've found the boy." Within minutes, flashlight beams appeared at the top of the ravine as rescue personnel arrived. Getting Ethan out proved challenging, the slope too treacherous for a direct ascent, with an injured child. Paramedics had to stabilize him first, then use a basket stretcher and pulley system hastily assembled in the storm. Throughout the extraction, Ethan drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling about the man from the car and how Scruffy bit him. By the time they reached the ambulance, Jennifer was numb with cold and relief. As they loaded Ethan inside, Agent Reeves approached with a respectful nod to Jennifer. "You were right to trust your instincts," she admitted. "And the dog." The drive to the hospital passed in a blur. Doctors rushed Ethan into treatment immediately, leaving Jennifer in a sterile waiting room with Robert and a uniformed officer. "He's hypothermic and dehydrated," a nurse explained after the initial assessment, "but his vital signs are stabilizing." 2 agonizing hours later, the emergency room doctor approached Jennifer with a small plastic evidence bag. Inside was a jagged metal object, darkened with dried blood. "We found this embedded deep in his right thigh," the doctor explained. "It appears to be the tip of a hunting knife. Broke off during whatever happened out there." The doctor continued explaining Ethan's condition: moderate hypothermia, a serious infection beginning in the leg wound, various cuts and bruises. But Jennifer's focus remained fixed on the metal fragment. As she stared at the knife tip that had been buried in her son's flesh, a cold clarity replaced her previous shock. While holding the evidence of deliberate violence against her child, Jennifer finally understood that this was no random occurrence or opportunistic crime. Someone had intentionally targeted her son, attacked him with a weapon, pursued him into the woods, and that person was still out there. The antiseptic hospital smell burned Jennifer's nostrils as she sat in the vinyl chair beside Ethan's bed, her body rigid with exhaustion. 3 days had passed since they'd pulled her son from the ravine. 3 days of doctors, police interviews, and the constant beeping of medical equipment monitoring his vital signs. On the small television mounted in the corner of the room, a blonde reporter stood outside the county sheriff's office, her expression appropriately somber as she described the latest developments in what the news had dubbed the Wilson abduction. Sources confirm that authorities have located an abandoned dark blue sedan approximately 25 miles from the site of the attempted kidnapping, the reporter announced. Forensic teams are processing the vehicle for evidence, including what appears to be canine blood and several partial fingerprints. Jennifer's gaze shifted from the television to Ethan's sleeping form. IV tubes snaked from his arm, delivering antibiotics to fight the infection that had developed in his leg wound. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic, explaining that children were remarkably resilient. Still, he drifted in and out of consciousness, the combination of trauma, medication, and exhaustion keeping him in a hazy twilight state. A light knock drew her attention. Sheriff Carter stood in the doorway, his weathered face showing the strain of sleepless nights. "How's he doing?" he asked quietly, nodding toward Ethan. "Better," Jennifer replied. "His fever broke this morning. The doctor says the antibiotics are finally winning." The sheriff nodded, relief momentarily softening his professional demeanor. "That's good news." He hesitated. "Mrs. Wilson, when he wakes up and feels strong enough, we need to ask him some questions. The FBI behavioral analysts think he might remember details that could help us identify his attacker." Jennifer's protective instincts flared. "He's just a little boy who's been through hell." "I know," Carter said gently, "but children sometimes notice things adults wouldn't. And the sooner we can get a description, the better our chances of catching this guy before he tries again." The implication hung heavy in the sterile air. "Before he tries to take another child?" Jennifer nodded reluctantly. "When he's ready," she conceded. As if on cue, Ethan stirred, his eyelids fluttering. Unlike previous brief moments of consciousness, this time his eyes opened fully, immediately seeking Jennifer's face. "Mom?" His voice came out raspy from disuse. Jennifer leaned forward, smoothing his hair back from his forehead. "I'm right here, baby. You're safe now." Ethan's gaze moved cautiously around the hospital room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings before settling on Sheriff Carter. His body tensed visibly. "It's okay," Jennifer assured him. "Sheriff Carter is here to help us. He's been looking for you ever since you disappeared." The sheriff approached slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "Hey there, tough guy. You gave us quite a scare." He smiled gently. "How are you feeling?" Ethan considered the question with the seriousness only children can muster for simple inquiries. "My leg hurts," he finally answered, "and I'm thirsty." Jennifer quickly poured water from the bedside pitcher, helping Ethan take small sips through a straw. "Ethan," Sheriff Carter began carefully, "do you think you could tell us what happened when you went to take out the trash? Whatever you remember might help us find the bad person who hurt you." Fear flickered across Ethan's face, but he nodded slowly. Jennifer squeezed his hand encouragingly. "I was dragging the trash bag to the can," he started, his voice small but growing stronger with each word. A blue car stopped on the road. A man got out and asked if I needed help with the garbage. He paused, his forehead creasing with the effort of recollection. I said no thank you, like you taught me to say to strangers. His eyes sought Jennifer's approval, but then he came closer anyway. I saw something shiny in his hand, a knife. Jennifer's grip tightened around her son's fingers, fighting to keep her expression neutral, despite the rage and horror building inside her. When he grabbed for me, Scruffy jumped at him and bit his arm really hard. Pride briefly replaced fear in Ethan's voice. The man yelled and dropped the knife. I ran into the woods because I knew you said never to run toward the road if a stranger comes. That was very smart, Sheriff Carter affirmed. What happened next? It was really dark, Ethan continued. I couldn't see where I was going. Scruffy was barking behind me and I heard the man shouting. His voice wavered. I fell down the hill and couldn't climb back up. My leg hurt, really bad, and I was scared to shout in case the man heard me. Tears welled in his eyes. I kept thinking you would find me, Mom. Jennifer leaned forward, pressing a kiss to his forehead. I did, baby. I never stopped looking. Sheriff Carter produced a tablet from his jacket. Ethan, we have some pictures we'd like you to look at. If you see the man who tried to take you, just point to him. You don't have to say anything. He swiped through a series of mugshots while Jennifer watched Ethan's face closely. On the 7th photo, her son's entire body went rigid. That's him, Ethan whispered, turning his face away from the screen. He had the same beard. Sheriff Carter nodded grimly, making a note. You did great, Ethan. This helps us a lot. After the sheriff stepped outside to make a call, Jennifer gently stroked Ethan's hand. Who was it? She asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. A convicted predator released from Riverside State Penitentiary 3 weeks ago, Carter explained upon returning. He was supposed to be checking in with his parole officer daily, but he missed his last 2 appointments. The sheriff's radio crackled with an incoming transmission, which he acknowledged, before turning back to Jennifer. We've got every available resource hunting for him now that we have a positive ID. He won't get far, he assured her. An agent will remain stationed outside this room until we have him in custody. 4 days later, Ethan was released from the hospital. The infection in his leg had responded well to treatment, though a small scar would remain where the knife tip had been embedded, a permanent reminder of that night. Jennifer drove slowly along the familiar country road, hyper-aware of Ethan's silence in the back seat. Scruffy sat beside him, the terrier's head resting protectively on the boy's lap. The dog hadn't left Ethan's side since their emotional reunion at the hospital, where the nurses had bent visiting rules after seeing how the child's face lit up when the small dog bounded into the room. As they pulled into their driveway, Jennifer noticed the changes immediately. New security lights illuminated the entire property, and a sturdy fence now enclosed the backyard. Robert Miller stood by the front porch, adjusting a motion sensor. Robert did all this while you were in the hospital, Jennifer explained, as she helped Ethan from the car. He wanted to make sure we felt safe coming home. Ethan regarded the veteran with solemn eyes before offering a small nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't the effusive thanks a child might normally give, but Jennifer recognized it as a significant gesture from her traumatized son. That evening, as Ethan rested on the living room sofa watching cartoons, Jennifer found Robert working on reinforcing the back fence. I can never thank you enough, she said, offering him a steaming mug of coffee. Robert accepted it with a nod, his weathered hands wrapping around the ceramic. No need for thanks. He took a sip before continuing. When I lost my son, I made a promise that I'd do anything to prevent it from happening to another family. That's why I photograph strange cars. Why I observe. He trailed off, perhaps realizing how his vigilance might appear suspicious to others who didn't understand his motivation. Your son. What happened to him? Jennifer asked gently. Robert's expression tightened. Car accident. Driver was never found. Hit and run. The simple statements belied the obvious depth of pain behind them. 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days ago. Before Jennifer could respond, their phones chimed simultaneously with an emergency alert. The text message was brief. Suspect in Wilson abduction, apprehended attempting to cross state line. Relief flooded through Jennifer, making her knees weak. She steadied herself against the fence post. "It's over," she whispered. "They got him." That night, as she tucked Ethan into his bed for the first time since the abduction, Jennifer noticed Scruffy already curled at the foot of the mattress, his alert eyes fixed on the doorway. "Is it okay if Scruffy sleeps with me?" Ethan asked quietly. "He keeps the bad dreams away." "Of course," Jennifer smiled, pulling the dinosaur-patterned comforter up to his chin. Her gaze fell on the bedside table where Ethan's digital watch now sat, repaired and ticking steadily. The cracked face had been replaced, the internal components fixed. "Robert fixed it," Ethan murmured sleepily. "He said some broken things can be fixed, even when they seem lost forever." Jennifer's throat tightened as she leaned down to kiss her son's forehead. "He's right about that," she whispered. In the weeks that followed, as the final reporter packed up her van and drove away from their rural home, life began finding a new rhythm. The media circus surrounding the miracle rescue had finally subsided, leaving the Wilson family to heal in private. From her kitchen window, Jennifer watched Robert teaching Ethan how to build a proper doghouse for Scruffy in the backyard. The small terrier raced circles around them, barking joyfully each time Ethan hammered a nail successfully. The sight warmed something in Jennifer that had been cold since that terrible night. Her son was smiling again, not as freely or as often as before, but genuine smiles nonetheless. Robert had become a steadying presence in their lives, his quiet strength and practical knowledge offering Ethan a sense of security that professional therapy alone couldn't provide. "You know," Jennifer said to Scruffy as the little dog trotted into the kitchen for a water break, "I think I've finally learned the difference between taking out the trash and throwing away what's precious." Scruffy merely tilted his head, as if to say this was obvious all along. Jennifer bolted upright in bed, heart pounding as Ethan's screams echoed through the darkened house. 2 weeks had passed since his rescue, but the nightmares remained relentless and unpredictable. She fumbled for the lamp switch, already on her feet before light flooded the room. "I'm coming, baby," she called, racing down the hallway toward her son's room. The permanently illuminated corridor nightlight cast elongated shadows as she moved. Another addition since the abduction, Ethan refused to sleep unless every hallway remained lit throughout the night. She found him tangled in his dinosaur sheets, eyes wide but unseeing, still caught in the grip of terror. Scruffy paced anxiously at the foot of the bed, whining softly. "Ethan, wake up. You're safe," Jennifer murmured, gathering his trembling body against hers. "It's just a dream. I'm right here." Gradually, awareness returned to his eyes. "He was chasing me again," Ethan whispered, burying his face against her shoulder. "Through the woods, but this time Scruffy wasn't there to help me." "It wasn't real," Jennifer assured him, smoothing his sweat-dampened hair. "And look, Scruffy is right here." The small terrier immediately hopped closer, nudging Ethan's hand with his nose. The touch of warm fur beneath his fingers seemed to ground the boy more effectively than any words could. After 20 minutes of soothing reassurances, Ethan finally drifted back to sleep, his hand firmly clutching Scruffy's collar. Jennifer remained beside him, studying the shadows beneath her son's eyes. The physical wounds had healed remarkably well. The scar on his leg was the only visible reminder of that night, but the psychological damage ran deeper than she had initially understood. Dr. Reynolds, the child psychologist, had warned her about this. Trauma doesn't heal in a linear fashion, she'd explained during their last session. There will be good days and setbacks. The important thing is consistent support and patience. Patience Jennifer had in abundance. It was time that felt increasingly precious as her savings dwindled with each passing day. Morning brought watery sunshine and the familiar ping of an incoming email on Jennifer's laptop. Another job application response. Another rejection. This one from the accounting firm in the neighboring county, citing overwhelming response from candidates with more recent experience. Jennifer closed her laptop with a sigh as Ethan padded into the kitchen, Scruffy at his heels. "Morning, sweetheart. Cereal or toast?" she asked, summoning a brightness she didn't feel. "Just toast, please," he replied, sliding into a chair at the kitchen table, eyes constantly drifting toward the windows and doors, checking exits, she realized. A habit he'd developed since coming home. Jennifer had just placed Ethan's breakfast before him when her phone chimed with a calendar alert, her online interview with Westridge Publishing in 20 minutes. She'd nearly forgotten. "Ethan, I have a job interview on the computer. It's really important. Do you think you can play in the living room while I talk to these people?" Panic immediately flashed across his face. "Can I stay with you?" he pleaded, abandoning his toast. "I'll be super quiet. They won't even know I'm there." Jennifer knelt to his eye level. "It's just for half an hour, and I'll be right in the next room. You can see me through the doorway." Ethan's lower lip trembled. What if he comes back while you're busy?" "Sweetheart, they caught the bad man. He's in jail now, remember? And look, Scruffy will stay with you. He's your protector, right?" The boy glanced at the terrier, who sat attentively beside him. "I guess." 20 minutes later, Jennifer positioned her laptop at the kitchen table, angled so she could keep Ethan in her peripheral vision, where he sat in the living room. She smoothed her blouse, applied a quick touch of lipstick, and launched the video call. 3 faces appeared on screen, introducing themselves as the hiring committee. Jennifer summoned her most professional demeanor, despite Ethan creeping gradually closer to the kitchen doorway, eventually settling on the floor just outside with Scruffy in his lap, both visible to her, but not to the camera. Midway through explaining her experience with client account management, Jennifer noticed Ethan's wide eyes fixed on something behind her. She faltered momentarily, fighting the urge to turn around. "Ms. Wilson?" prompted the gray-haired woman on screen. "You were saying about the quarterly reporting procedures?" "Yes, sorry," Jennifer refocused with effort. "We implemented a new tracking system that reduced errors by 30% while—" A soft thump from the backyard interrupted her. Ethan scrambled to his feet, Scruffy already racing toward the kitchen window, barking frantically. "I'm so sorry," Jennifer apologized to the increasingly bemused interviewers. "There's a situation I need to address immediately. Could we possibly reschedule?" Without waiting for a response, she ended the call and hurried to Ethan, who stood frozen, staring out the window. "What is it? What did you see?" "Someone was by the fence," he whispered. "I saw a shadow moving." Jennifer peered out cautiously. The yard appeared empty, but Scruffy continued barking at the far corner where the new fence met the tree line. The doorbell rang, making them both jump. Through the peephole, Jennifer recognized Robert's weathered face and exhaled with relief. "Thought I'd stop by to finish reinforcing that back corner of the fence," he explained, toolbox in hand. "Noticed some deer had been pushing against it." Jennifer's shoulders sagged with relief. "You scared us a little." Ethan thought he saw someone in the yard. Robert's expression shifted immediately to alert concern. "I'll check it out thoroughly." While Robert inspected the property, Jennifer attempted to calm Ethan, who remained convinced he'd seen a human figure rather than a deer. Later that afternoon, Dr. Reynolds arrived for Ethan's home therapy session. Jennifer used the hour to sort through unpaid bills at the kitchen table, wincing at the mounting total. The hospital copays alone would take months to clear, even if she found employment tomorrow. From the living room came the soft murmur of the therapist's voice, occasionally punctuated by Ethan's hesitant responses. Jennifer tried not to eavesdrop, respecting his privacy, but couldn't help noticing when Dr. Reynolds approached her after the session, expression troubled. "I'd like to show you something Ethan drew today," she said, extending a piece of paper. The crayon drawing showed their house, recognizable by the big oak tree in front, but with dark figures lurking around the perimeter, shadowy, faceless watchers positioned at windows and behind trees. "Is he still seeing the man from the abduction in his dreams?" Jennifer asked. "Not exactly," Dr. Reynolds replied carefully. "He's developed a fear that people are watching the house, observing your family. It's not uncommon after trauma. The sense of safety has been shattered, so hypervigilance takes over." Jennifer nodded, her gaze drifting to where Ethan sat with Scruffy in the bay window, intently scanning the yard. "What can I do?" "Continue reinforcing safety and routine and—" Dr. Reynolds hesitated. "Consider if there might be any real basis for his fears. Children sometimes perceive things adults miss." After the therapist left, Jennifer found herself studying the drawing again, unsettled by the dark figures Ethan had placed around their home. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Robert stood on the porch, toolbox in one hand, a shopping bag in the other. "Finished with that fence. Not even a determined buck could get through now." He lifted the bag. "Brought sandwich fixings. Thought the boy might like something substantial for lunch." Jennifer felt a wave of gratitude as she invited him in. While she assembled sandwiches, Robert sat with Ethan, showing him how to properly measure wood for the doghouse they'd been planning. "You're good with the measurements," Robert remarked as Ethan carefully marked a piece of wood. "That's important for building things that last." Jennifer watched them interact, noting how Robert spoke to Ethan without condescension or excessive caution, treating him like a capable person rather than a fragile victim. Something in her chest warmed at the sight. Later, while Ethan enjoyed his first genuine smile of the day over half a turkey sandwich, Jennifer pulled Robert aside. "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done," she said quietly. Robert shook his head. "No need. I understand what you're going through. After James, my son, disappeared, I couldn't function for months." His voice remained steady, but pain shadowed his eyes. "Helping your family, it gives purpose to what happened." "How did you move forward?" Jennifer asked. "After losing him?" "One day at a time," Robert replied simply. "You learn to carry it differently, not lighter." The following morning brought Ethan's first day back at school. Jennifer had postponed it as long as possible, but routine was essential for recovery according to Dr. Reynolds, and the school had implemented special monitoring for Ethan's security. "Do I have to go?" Ethan asked, clutching his backpack straps with white-knuckled fingers as they approached the elementary school entrance. "Just for half a day today," Jennifer assured him, squeezing his hand. "And Mrs. Bradshaw will call me immediately if you want to come home." Ethan looked unconvinced, his eyes darting nervously among the other children streaming into the building. Several stared openly at him. The local celebrity survivor whose story had been plastered across regional news for weeks. "Can Scruffy come?" he whispered. "Not today, sweetie. But remember what Robert said about being brave?" Ethan nodded reluctantly. "That brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing things even when you are scared." "Exactly." Jennifer knelt to hug him tightly. "I'll be back at noon. Right here." She maintained her composed smile until Ethan disappeared inside, then allowed her shoulders to sag with the emotional weight of separation. The 4 hours stretched before her like an eternity. Returning home, Jennifer was halfway through cleaning the kitchen when she noticed the framed school photo of Ethan was missing from its usual spot on the wall. Frowning, she searched nearby surfaces, thinking she might have moved it while dusting. When it didn't turn up, she methodically checked each room, a gnawing unease growing in her stomach. The photo wasn't anywhere in the house, yet she clearly remembered seeing it yesterday. Jennifer froze as a chilling realization took hold. Someone had been in her home while they were at school, someone who wanted a photo of Ethan. Jennifer stood frozen in her living room as she realized the shiny object left carefully on the windowsill of Ethan's bedroom was a small school pin she was certain had been attached to his jacket that very morning. Jennifer placed the school pin on her palm with trembling fingers, studying the small metal falcon, Westbrook Elementary's mascot. She was absolutely certain Ethan had been wearing it when she'd dropped him at school that morning. The realization that someone had not only entered their home, but had also been close enough to her son to take this item made her stomach churn with visceral fear. She grabbed her phone, fingers shaking as she dialed Sheriff Carter's number. "Wilson residence," she said when the deputy answered. "I need the sheriff immediately. Someone's been in my house again." While waiting for Carter to arrive, Jennifer methodically checked every lock and window, finding no signs of forced entry. Scruffy followed anxiously at her heels, occasionally stopping to sniff at certain spots with unusual interest, particularly near Ethan's bedroom window. The cruiser pulled up 20 minutes later. Sheriff Carter examined the pin with a grim expression before collecting it in an evidence bag. "We'll check for fingerprints, but if it's who I think it is, he'd be smart enough to wear gloves," he said, surveying the window where Jennifer had found the pin. "You're positive this was on Ethan's jacket this morning?" "Absolutely positive," Jennifer confirmed. "It's part of his school uniform. I fastened it myself before we left." Carter nodded, his expression troubled. "I'm calling in forensics to dust the house again, especially around this window. In the meantime, I'll have a deputy stay here until we've swept the property." As the sheriff stepped outside to radio for backup, Jennifer called the school in near panic, relieved when the secretary confirmed that Ethan was safely in class, currently having art with Mrs. Keller. "Would you like us to bring him to the office so you can speak with him?" the secretary offered. "No," Jennifer decided after a moment. "Let him finish his class, but please have someone check on him regularly. I'll explain everything when I pick him up." By afternoon, the house crawled with police technicians dusting for prints and collecting trace evidence. The deputy stationed outside reported nothing unusual, but Jennifer couldn't shake the feeling of violation. Someone had been watching them closely enough to know when the house would be empty. Sheriff Carter returned as the forensics team was packing up their equipment. His expression told Jennifer he had news before he even spoke. "We've learned something concerning," he began, leading Jennifer to the kitchen table, away from the departing officers. "The man we arrested for Ethan's abduction, Gregory Walsh, has a brother named Michael. He's been making threats against families who've testified against his brother in previous cases." Jennifer sank into a chair. "But we haven't testified yet. The prosecutor said the trial wouldn't be for months." "Michael Walsh doesn't seem to care about those distinctions," Carter replied. "He was spotted 2 counties over last week and then disappeared. We've put out an APB, but—" He trailed off, then continued more gently. "I'd like to assign a deputy to watch your house overnight, and we'll coordinate with the school for Ethan's safety." Jennifer nodded numbly, her mind racing through implications. "You think he's the one who took Ethan's photo? Left the pin?" "It fits his pattern of intimidation," Carter confirmed. "But we'll catch him, Mrs. Wilson. Every law enforcement agency in 3 states is looking for him." After the sheriff left, Jennifer methodically moved through the house, checking locks, windows, and closets with obsessive precision. She then sat at the kitchen table, opening her laptop to an email notification, an offer for a part-time position at Oak Ridge Bookstore, downtown. The moment that should have brought relief now felt hollow against the backdrop of this new threat. By the time she collected Ethan from school, Jennifer had forced her features into a calm mask. He didn't need more reasons to be afraid. "How was your day?" she asked as they walked to the car, hyper-aware of their surroundings. "Okay, I guess," Ethan replied quietly. "Some kids kept asking me questions about what happened. Mrs. Bradshaw made them stop." Jennifer noticed his hand repeatedly moving to his jacket lapel, unconsciously searching for the missing pin. She decided not to mention it yet, not until they were safely home. That evening, after Ethan had finally fallen asleep with Scruffy standing guard at the foot of his bed, Jennifer searched through his belongings, looking for anything else that might be missing. Her breath caught when she discovered several drawings hidden beneath his mattress. Disturbing images of dark figures watching their house, peering through windows, hiding behind trees. The crude crayon illustrations matched what Dr. Reynolds had shown her, but these were more detailed, more numerous. On one, Ethan had written, "He watches at recess," in uneven block letters. Jennifer's hand flew to her mouth. Gathering the drawings, she returned to the kitchen where her phone lay charging. She needed to tell Sheriff Carter about this immediately. Before she could dial, Ethan appeared in the doorway, eyes wide and frightened. "Mom," he whispered, "I need to tell you something." Jennifer set the phone down. "What is it, sweetheart?" "There's a man who watches me at school," Ethan said, his voice barely audible. "He stands by the fence during recess. I thought maybe he was a new security guard, but..." He swallowed hard. "Today he waved at me and pointed to his eyes, then to me." Cold fear slid down Jennifer's spine. "Why didn't you tell a teacher?" "Because when I looked again, he was gone. And..." Ethan's voice broke. "I was afraid you wouldn't let me go back to school if I told you. And then you'd lose your new job because you'd have to stay home with me and..." "Oh, Ethan." Jennifer pulled him into a tight embrace. "Nothing is more important than keeping you safe. Nothing." She called Sheriff Carter immediately, reporting what Ethan had told her. The sheriff promised to station plainclothes officers around the school the following day. "We'll catch him," Carter assured her. "If he's watching the school, we'll be watching him." 2 days later, Robert invited Jennifer and Ethan for dinner at his house, a first since they'd become acquainted. The invitation came as Jennifer was frantically preparing for her first day at the bookstore, trying to arrange childcare and transportation for Ethan. "I'll pick him up from school and keep him at my place until you're done," Robert offered simply. "And you both can have a home-cooked meal for a change." Jennifer accepted gratefully, knowing that Robert's background had been thoroughly checked by the sheriff's department after the rescue. If there was anyone besides herself she trusted with Ethan's safety, it was the quiet veteran who'd helped save her son. Robert's modest ranch-style home surprised Jennifer with its immaculate organization. While sparse in decoration, every item seemed precisely placed, from the books arranged by height on shelves to the perfectly aligned placemats on the dining table. "It's not much," Robert apologized as he led them inside. "Haven't had guests in a while." Ethan wandered into the living room, drawn to the photographs on the mantelpiece, a smiling boy about his own age, with Robert's same serious eyes, in various outdoor settings. "Is this your son?" Ethan asked. Robert nodded, setting down a tray of lemonade. "Yes, that's James. He would have been 13 this year." Jennifer studied the photos while Robert busied himself in the kitchen, noting the striking resemblance between father and son. In each picture, James wore the same genuinely happy expression, often engaged in activities like fishing or building model airplanes with his father. After dinner, a surprisingly delicious lasagna that Ethan actually finished. Robert offered to show Ethan his workshop in the converted garage. Jennifer used the opportunity to clear the dishes, grateful for this brief taste of normalcy amid weeks of tension. As she placed glasses in the sink, she noticed a door slightly ajar at the end of the hallway. Curiosity drew her closer. Perhaps a bathroom she could use before the drive home. The door swung open to reveal what must have been Robert's home office. Unlike the minimal decoration in the rest of the house, This room's walls were covered with newspaper clippings, photographs, and maps connected by red string, like something from a detective movie. Jennifer stepped inside, drawn to the largest section where dozens of articles about missing children were carefully arranged in chronological order. Each case had been meticulously annotated in Robert's precise handwriting, with locations highlighted on an adjacent map. Her heart began to race as she realized that many of the cases had been solved, with clippings announcing arrests or children found. Robert had written "Resolved" across these in bold red marker. In the center of this wall of tragedy was an enlarged photograph of James, surrounded by every article written about his disappearance. Unlike the other cases, no "Resolved" marked this section. It helps me make sense of things. Jennifer jumped at Robert's voice behind her. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I was looking for the bathroom and—" "It's fine," Robert said, entering the room. "After James, I needed purpose. Started tracking cases, looking for patterns. Sometimes I see connections the police miss." Jennifer stared at the wall, suddenly aware of the obsessive detail represented. "This is why you photograph suspicious vehicles. Why you noticed the car the night Ethan disappeared." Robert nodded. "I know how it looks. Sheriff Carter thought I was a suspect at first." A shadow crossed his face. "Wouldn't be the first time." "What do you mean?" Jennifer asked, a new uneasiness stirring beneath her gratitude. 2 years ago, another child went missing near where I was volunteering for a search party. They questioned me for 12 hours because of my unusual interest in missing children cases. His bitter laugh held no humor, as if trying to prevent what happened to James made me suspicious. Jennifer hesitated, her eyes drawn to a section of the wall where Michael Walsh's face was prominently displayed, with various newspaper clippings about his brother's crimes. "You knew about the brother before the sheriff told me," she realized. "I've been tracking predators in 3 counties since James disappeared," Robert admitted. "Knowledge is protection. When the sheriff mentioned a suspect in custody for Ethan's abduction, I recognized the pattern." Jennifer felt conflicting emotions surge through her. Gratitude for Robert's help in finding Ethan, uneasiness about his obsession, and confusion about where to place her trust. "Mom!" Ethan's voice called from the workshop. "Robert's showing me how to build a birdhouse. Come see." The moment broke. Jennifer moved toward the door, but paused to ask the question she'd been avoiding. "Robert, did you ever find out what happened to James?" Pain washed across his features. "No. That's why I do this, so no other parent has to live with not knowing." Later that night, after tucking Ethan into bed with Scruffy standing guard, Jennifer sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, the image of Robert's wall of missing children fresh in her mind. She hesitated only briefly before typing "Robert Miller suspect child disappearance" into the search engine. The results made her stomach drop. A local newspaper article from 2 years ago appeared. "Former military officer questioned in Dixon County disappearance." The article briefly mentioned Robert had been investigated, but ultimately cleared of suspicion in the case of a 7-year-old who vanished from a park. Jennifer was still processing this information when her phone rang, Sheriff Carter's number lighting up the screen. "Mrs. Wilson," his voice carried unusual urgency. "Michael Walsh has been spotted in town. A gas station attendant recognized him from the bulletins we've distributed. I'm sending a patrol car to your location now." As Jennifer hung up, the realization hit her that Ethan was not in his bed. The back door stood slightly ajar, small footprints leading into the darkness of the backyard. Jennifer's heart hammered in her chest as she raced out the back door into the darkness, panic threatening to overwhelm her. The beam of her hastily grabbed flashlight cut through the night, illuminating the small footprints leading toward the far corner of the yard. "Ethan!" she called, trying to keep her voice low enough not to alert neighbors but loud enough for her son to hear. "Ethan, where are you?" The wind rustled through the trees at the property line, creating shifting shadows that seemed to move with malicious intent. Jennifer swept the flashlight across the yard, finally catching a glimpse of movement near the newly reinforced fence. There, in the corner where the wooden panels met the tree line, she spotted them. Ethan's small form huddled close to Robert's larger one, their heads bent together in what appeared to be secretive conversation. Relief flooded through her, quickly followed by confusion and suspicion. "Ethan!" she called more firmly, hurrying across the damp grass. Both figures looked up, startled by her approach. Ethan's face registered immediate guilt, like a child caught stealing cookies. Robert straightened, his expression carefully neutral, as Jennifer approached. "What's going on here?" she demanded, reaching for Ethan's hand. "Do you have any idea how scared I was when I found your bed empty?" "I'm sorry, Mom," Ethan whispered, looking down at his sneakers. "I saw Robert checking the fence and wanted to help." "At 9:30 at night?" Jennifer's voice rose with disbelief. "After I tucked you in?" Robert cleared his throat. "I apologize, Jennifer. I was doing a perimeter check, habit since hearing about Michael Walsh being spotted nearby. Ethan saw me from his window and came out. I was just about to bring him back inside." Jennifer studied Robert's face, searching for deception, but finding only his usual stoic concern. After what she'd discovered about his past, every interaction now carried a shadow of doubt. "What were you two whispering about?" she asked directly. Robert exchanged a glance with Ethan before answering. "I was teaching him how to spot someone trying to hide near the property. Signs like disturbed branches or unusual shadows. Basic situational awareness." Ethan nodded eagerly. "He showed me how to listen for sounds that don't belong, Mom, and how to tell if someone's been walking around our house when we're not here." Jennifer's anger deflated slightly. After learning about Michael Walsh's presence in town, such knowledge didn't seem entirely inappropriate. And yet, the secretive nature of it bothered her deeply. "Inside now," she told Ethan firmly. "We need to talk." Once back in the kitchen, Ethan sat at the table looking miserable while Jennifer poured him a glass of water. Robert remained by the door, clearly uncertain of his standing. "Sheriff Carter just called," Jennifer explained, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "Michael Walsh has been spotted in town. That's why I was so scared when I found you missing." Ethan's eyes widened with fear. "The bad man's brother? Here?" Jennifer nodded, sitting across from him. "Ethan, I need to know about these secret meetings with Robert. How many times have you spoken with him without telling me?" Ethan squirmed uncomfortably. "Just a few times. In the yard when you were busy with job applications. He's been teaching me stuff." "What kind of stuff?" "How to be safer, how to watch for danger." Ethan's voice grew stronger, more certain. "He understands how it feels to be afraid all the time, Mom. He doesn't tell me not to worry like Dr. Reynolds does. He shows me how to do something about it." Jennifer glanced at Robert, who remained silent, allowing Ethan to speak for himself. "I should have told you," Robert finally said. "But Ethan asked me not to. He was afraid you'd worry more." Jennifer felt torn between gratitude for Robert's protective instincts and concern about his methods. After seeing his wall of missing children cases and learning about his previous interaction with police, uncertainty clouded her judgment. "I appreciate you trying to help," she told Robert carefully. "But no more secrets. If you want to teach Ethan something, you discuss it with me first. Understood?" Robert nodded solemnly. Completely. Later, after Ethan had finally fallen asleep and Robert had departed, promising to check the property again before dawn, Jennifer called Sheriff Carter with an update. He arranged for a deputy to watch the house overnight and confirmed extra patrols around the school. Jennifer's first day at the bookstore was a blur of training procedures, inventory systems, and restocking shelves. The owner, a kind elderly woman named Margaret, seemed understanding about Jennifer's frequent glances at her phone. "First day away is always the hardest," Margaret commented during their lunch break. My grandson had separation anxiety after his parents divorced. Took months before I could leave the room without him panicking. Jennifer managed a tight smile, not bothering to explain that her anxiety stemmed from the possible presence of a vengeful criminal in their small town. The normalcy of organizing fiction bestsellers and processing customer orders felt surreal against the backdrop of the last month's events. Just after noon, her phone rang, the school's number flashing on the screen. Her heart dropped as she answered. "Ms. Wilson, this is Principal Hayward. There's been a situation at the school." Jennifer was already grabbing her purse, panic rising. "Is Ethan all right?" "He's fine," the principal assured her quickly. "But we've had a security incident. A man matching Michael Walsh's description was observed watching the playground during recess. Our security officer approached him, but he fled before police arrived." Jennifer's legs nearly gave out. "I'm coming right now." "No need," Principal Hayward continued. "The police are here, and we've implemented lockdown procedures as a precaution. The children are safe in their classrooms, but we're advising parents that they may pick up their children early if they wish." By the time Jennifer reached the school, the parking lot was filled with police vehicles and anxious parents. Officer Jensen met her at the entrance, escorting her to the main office where Ethan waited with a counselor, Scruffy curled protectively at his feet. The school had made an exception to allow the therapy dog on campus after the abduction. "Mom!" Ethan launched himself into her arms. "They said the bad man's brother was watching us at recess." Jennifer held him tight, nodding to the counselor over his shoulder. "It's okay, baby. The police are going to catch him. We've organized parent groups to escort children home," Officer Jensen explained as they left the building. "No child leaves alone or with just one adult. Sheriff Carter suggested Mr. Miller could join your group since he lives nearby." The mention of Robert stirred Jennifer's conflicted feelings again, but she nodded agreement. Safety in numbers made sense. An emergency community meeting was hastily arranged for that evening at the town hall. Jennifer sat with Ethan and Robert as Sheriff Carter addressed the packed room, explaining the measures being implemented to locate and apprehend Michael Walsh. "Until we have him in custody, we need everyone to remain vigilant," the sheriff emphasized. "Report any suspicious activity immediately. Don't approach anyone matching his description." After the meeting, several parents organized a neighborhood watch rotation. Jennifer found herself reluctantly accepting Robert's offer to drive Ethan home from school for the remainder of the week while she worked. "I can adjust my schedule," Robert assured her, "and we'll never be alone, always part of the parent caravan." Watching Robert interact easily with the other parents, Jennifer wondered how much her suspicions were colored by fear rather than evidence. He had, after all, been cleared of any wrongdoing in the case she'd read about online. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor, a man in a pressed gray suit who introduced himself as Lloyd Perkins from Child Protective Services. "Routine follow-up in cases involving child trauma," he explained, showing identification that Jennifer examined carefully. "I just need to assess Ethan's home environment and speak with him briefly about his recovery progress." Something about the man's demeanor made Jennifer uneasy, though his credentials appeared legitimate. She invited him in while Ethan was getting dressed, offering coffee that the man declined. "If you don't mind my asking, how was this visit arranged?" Jennifer inquired. "Dr. Reynolds usually coordinates Ethan's care providers." "We received a report of concern," Perkins replied smoothly, making notes on his tablet. "Standard procedure." "A report? From whom?" "I'm not at liberty to say." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Now, about Ethan's sleeping patterns since the trauma." Before Jennifer could press further, Ethan entered the living room with Scruffy at his heels. The terrier stopped abruptly, hackles rising as a low growl emerged from his throat. "Scruffy?" Ethan looked confused. The dog had never shown aggression toward visitors before. The growl deepened, as Scruffy positioned himself between Ethan and the social worker, teeth bared. Perkins shifted uncomfortably. "Perhaps the dog should be secured while we talk." "He's normally very friendly," Jennifer said, watching Scruffy's uncharacteristic behavior with growing alarm. Something about this man had triggered the dog's protective instincts. "I'll just put him in my bedroom," Ethan suggested, but Scruffy refused to budge, continuing to growl at the visitor. After the uncomfortable interview concluded and Perkins left, promising to file his report promptly, Jennifer immediately called the Child Protective Services office. Her suspicions deepened when the receptionist confirmed no visit had been scheduled for the Wilson residence, and they had no employee named Lloyd Perkins. Jennifer's hands shook as she hung up. She dialed Robert immediately. "The man who was just here, he wasn't a real social worker," she explained frantically. "His ID was fake, and Scruffy knew something was wrong. He wouldn't stop growling." "Did you get a good look at him?" "His car?" Robert asked, his voice tense. "Gray sedan, couldn't see the plate. Average height, brown hair, wire-rimmed glasses." "I'm coming over," Robert said. "Don't open the door for anyone else." 20 minutes later, Robert arrived with Sheriff Carter, who took Jennifer's statement and issued an alert for the fake social worker. As the sheriff departed, promising to send a deputy to watch the house, Jennifer noticed Perkins driving slowly past the house again. "He's back," she gasped, pointing through the window. Without hesitation, Jennifer grabbed Ethan and Scruffy, racing toward Robert's truck, parked in the driveway. They scrambled inside as the gray sedan accelerated, making a sharp U-turn. "He knows we've made him," Robert said grimly, starting the engine. "We're going to my place. It's more secure." As they sped away, Jennifer glanced back at her house, then froze in shock as they drove past the gray sedan parked across the street. Through the window, she could clearly see the driver's face, identical to a photo on Robert's wall of known child predators. Hidden in Robert's house, they watched through the window as the false social worker methodically searched the Wilson property, and Jennifer recognized with horror the man's face. It was identical to one of the photos in Robert's mural about child predators. Robert pulled Jennifer away from the window, his expression grim, yet focused. "I recognized him immediately," he whispered, guiding them toward the kitchen, away from windows where they might be spotted. "That's Michael Walsh, but he's using an entirely different appearance than what the police bulletins show." "He had ID," Jennifer said, her voice shaking. "It looked so official." "Fake credentials aren't difficult to obtain if you know where to look," Robert replied, reaching for his phone. "I need to call Sheriff Carter." Ethan huddled against Jennifer, clutching Scruffy's collar as the dog remained vigilant, ears perked toward the front door. "Is he going to find us here?" the boy whispered. "No," Robert answered firmly before Jennifer could speak. "This house has security measures that aren't obvious from the outside." As Robert made the call, Jennifer took in their surroundings more carefully. Robert's living room appeared ordinary at first glance, but now she noticed the reinforced door frames, the subtle motion sensors in corners, the thickness of the windows. This wasn't just a house, it was a fortress disguised as a modest ranch home. "Sheriff's sending units, but they're stretched thin with the search perimeter," Robert informed them, hanging up. "It'll be at least 20 minutes. Jennifer's mind raced. "He'll be gone by then. He knows we recognized him." Robert's expression shifted, a calculating look replacing his concern. "Perhaps that's not what we want." "What do you mean?" "Walsh has been stalking you, intimidating you, trying to frighten you into silence before his brother's trial," Robert explained. "He's shown he's willing to come to your house posing as authorities, get close to Ethan. What if instead of running, we use his obsession against him?" Jennifer stared at him. "You want to trap him?" "The police are searching everywhere but here," Robert reasoned. "He thinks he's found us. If we control the situation instead of merely reacting..." "No," Jennifer shook her head vehemently. I'm not using my family as bait. Not Ethan, Robert clarified quickly. We can have Sarah take him somewhere safe, somewhere Walsh doesn't know about. But you and I, with the right preparation... Jennifer considered this, looking at Ethan's frightened face. The past weeks had been an endless cycle of fear and hiding, of looking over their shoulders and jumping at shadows. How long could they live like this? What exactly are you suggesting? She asked finally. Robert outlined his plan with military precision. Jennifer would call her friend Sarah to take Ethan to an undisclosed location. Meanwhile, they would set a trap, using Jennifer as visible bait, while Robert monitored from a concealed position with both a camera for evidence and communication to police. We know what he wants, Robert explained. He wants to frighten you to establish psychological control. Let him think he's succeeding. Jennifer felt her maternal instincts warring with the desperate need to end this nightmare. Ethan's safety is non-negotiable, she stated firmly. Agreed, Robert nodded. That's why he'll be nowhere near this. But Scruffy... He turned to the small dog who had proven his loyalty repeatedly. Scruffy might play a crucial role. An hour later, Sarah had collected Ethan, promising to take him to her sister's lakeside cabin 30 miles away, a location unknown to anyone connected with the Wilsons. Ethan had protested leaving his mother behind, but Jennifer had held him tight, promising this would be the last time they needed to hide. Be brave for me, she'd whispered. Robert and I are going to make sure the bad man can't bother us anymore. After they departed, Robert carefully attached a small GPS tracker to Scruffy's collar, disguised within the existing tag. If Walsh somehow slips past us, Scruffy can lead him on a chase that will be tracked. The police can intercept. Jennifer felt simultaneously terrified and resolute as she positioned herself in Robert's backyard, ostensibly searching through a garden shed as if looking for something important. From this angle, she would be visible to anyone watching from the wooded area behind the property, while Robert maintained visual contact from a concealed position in his workshop. Remember, your only job is to look distracted and vulnerable. Robert's voice came through the small earpiece he'd given her. Don't engage him directly. If he approaches, act startled and retreat toward the house where I'll intercept. Jennifer nodded slightly, knowing Robert could see her through the workshop window. She rummaged through garden tools, her movements deliberate but her senses hyper-alert to every sound around her. Sheriff Carter and 2 deputies were positioned strategically along the perimeter of Robert's property, but far enough away that Walsh wouldn't spot them during his approach. 20 minutes passed with excruciating slowness. Jennifer began to wonder if Walsh had abandoned his pursuit when Robert's urgent voice came through the earpiece. Movement at the tree line. My 2 o'clock. He's watching you. Jennifer forced herself to continue her task, fighting the instinct to look up. Her heart hammered so loudly, she was certain Walsh could hear it across the yard. He's moving closer, using the rhododendron bushes for cover, Robert narrated quietly. Sheriff Carter is being updated on his position. Stay calm. Jennifer pretended to find something interesting in an old flower pot, turning her back, partially toward the approaching threat as they'd planned. The sound of a twig snapping nearby sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. He's 30 feet away and closing, Robert whispered. Get ready. Jennifer reached for a trowel, then deliberately dropped it, bending to retrieve it with agonizing slowness. When she straightened, a calm voice spoke from much closer than she'd expected. Lose something important, Mrs. Wilson? Jennifer spun around with genuine shock. Michael Walsh stood just 15 feet away, no longer disguised as the social worker. His smile contained no warmth, his eyes calculating as he studied her reaction. Who are you? What do you want? She demanded, backing toward the house as planned. I think you know exactly who I am, Walsh replied, moving laterally to cut off her retreat path. Just as I know you're planning to testify against my brother, that would be unfortunate for everyone involved. Robert's voice came urgently through the earpiece. "He's deviating from the expected approach. I'm repositioning. Keep him talking." Jennifer's mouth went dry as she realized Walsh was now between her and the house, between her and Robert. This wasn't how they'd planned it. "Your brother attacked my son," she said, finding strength in her anger. "He deserves whatever sentence he gets." Walsh's smile tightened. "My brother has a problem, I admit. But family protects family, Mrs. Wilson. I'm sure you understand that principle." He took another step forward. "Perhaps we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone." Jennifer backed away, acutely aware that she was now moving farther from Robert's position. "There's no arrangement to be made. Your brother is going to prison." Walsh's expression hardened. "Then I'm afraid we have a problem." At that moment, Scruffy burst from beneath the porch steps, barking furiously as he charged toward Walsh. The man spun in surprise, momentarily distracted by the small but determined terrier circling and barking at his feet. "Call off your mutt," Walsh snapped, his composure cracking. Instead of following the plan, instead of Scruffy leading Walsh on a chase toward the waiting police, the dog remained firmly between Jennifer and the threat, teeth bared. Walsh reached into his jacket, and Jennifer's blood ran cold at the glimpse of metal. Before she could react, Robert emerged from behind the garden shed instead of the house, having circled around when he saw Walsh changing direction. "Police are on their way," Robert announced firmly. "It's over, Walsh." Walsh's reaction was startlingly quick. He lunged not toward Robert, but toward Jennifer, grabbing her arm and twisting it behind her back before either could react. The cold press of metal against her ribs confirmed her worst fears. "Nobody moves, or she gets hurt," Walsh growled, "including the dog." Scruffy growled but held his position, seemingly understanding the danger. Robert froze, his eyes meeting Jennifer's with an unspoken communication. "You're surrounded," Robert said calmly. "There's no escaping this." "There's always a way out," Walsh countered, edging backward, dragging Jennifer with him. "And she's coming with me as insurance." Robert took a careful step forward. "That's not happening." What followed happened so quickly that Jennifer could barely process it. Robert feinted to the left, causing Walsh to adjust his stance. In that split second, Jennifer drove her elbow backward with all her strength, connecting with Walsh's solar plexus. As his grip loosened, Robert charged forward, tackling the man to the ground. The knife clattered away, but Walsh fought with desperate strength. Jennifer scrambled for the weapon, kicking it far out of reach before grabbing a garden shovel and returning to the fray. Robert and Walsh grappled in the dirt, each landing blows as they fought for dominance. When Walsh gained momentary advantage, rolling on top of Robert and wrapping hands around his throat, Jennifer swung the shovel's flat side against Walsh's back. The blow wasn't enough to seriously injure him, but sufficient to disrupt his attack. Robert bucked upward, throwing Walsh off balance. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer by the second. Walsh heard them too, his face contorting with the realization that his options were vanishing. He made one final, desperate lunge toward the woods, but found Scruffy blocking his path, teeth bared and hackles raised. The police cruisers screeched into the driveway as Robert pinned Walsh to the ground. Sheriff Carter and his deputies rushed forward, weapons drawn. "On the ground! Hands where I can see them!" Carter commanded, though Robert already had Walsh subdued. As the deputies handcuffed Walsh, Jennifer sank to her knees, the adrenaline draining from her system. Robert moved to her side, his lip bleeding from the fight. "Are you hurt?" he asked, genuine concern in his eyes. Jennifer shook her head, too overwhelmed to speak as she watched the officers lead Walsh toward a patrol car. Relief flooded through her at the sight of the man who had terrorized her family finally in custody. But as Walsh was guided into the back seat of the cruiser, he turned his head, making direct eye contact with Jennifer. His lips curved into a disturbing smile. "You really believe we know where your son is now?" he said, his voice carrying clearly across the yard. Walsh's words hit Jennifer like a physical blow, draining the color from her face. The implication that Ethan might be in danger shattered the momentary relief of seeing Walsh in handcuffs. "Sarah," she gasped, fumbling for her phone with trembling fingers. "We need to check on Ethan immediately." Robert steadied her hands as she dialed, the phone ringing interminably while Sheriff Carter approached, his expression grim after overhearing Walsh's taunt. "He's bluffing," Carter said firmly. "Standard intimidation tactic." When Sarah's voicemail answered instead of Sarah herself, panic surged through Jennifer's veins. "She's not picking up." "Try again," Robert urged, his own face tightening with concern. Jennifer redialed frantically, counting each unanswered ring. Just as she was about to disconnect, Sarah's breathless voice finally came through. "Jennifer, is everything okay? Are you with Ethan? Is he safe?" Jennifer demanded, too frantic for pleasantries. "Yes, of course," Sarah replied, confusion evident in her tone. "We're fine, but we're not at the cabin anymore. I got a strange call about an hour ago. Someone asking very specific questions about where I was headed. I didn't recognize the voice, but they knew my name and mentioned Ethan." Jennifer's knees nearly buckled. "Where are you now?" "I didn't tell anyone where we were going, just like you said," Sarah continued. "But after that call, I didn't feel safe at the cabin, so we moved to our usual place instead." "Your usual place?" Jennifer repeated, a new fear blooming. She had no idea what location Sarah meant, which meant she had no way of knowing if Ethan was truly safe. Sheriff Carter gestured for the phone, which Jennifer reluctantly handed over. "Ms. Chambers, this is Sheriff Carter. I need your exact location to send officers for protection." He listened intently, then frowned. "I see. Stay where you are and don't open the door for anyone except uniformed officers. We'll be there as soon as possible." He returned the phone to Jennifer. "She's at her grandmother's old hunting lodge near Whispering Pines Lake. Says it's where she takes Ethan fishing sometimes. Their special place." Jennifer shook her head in frustration. "I've never heard of it. Sarah mentioned taking him fishing, but I didn't know where." "We need to go there now," Robert interjected. "Walsh's comment suggests he has accomplices." Carter nodded grimly. "I'm dispatching units, but it'll take time to coordinate. In the meantime, I'll escort you both there myself." As they sped toward the lake, Jennifer stared anxiously out the window, mentally cataloging all the threats against her family. The original abductor was in custody. Michael Walsh was now arrested. Who else could be involved? Walsh couldn't have acted alone, Robert reasoned from the back seat, breaking the tense silence. The surveillance, the break-ins, the intimidation, it's too coordinated for one person. The prison records show Gregory Walsh had a cellmate who was released 3 weeks before Ethan's abduction, Carter added. "We're trying to locate him now." Jennifer closed her eyes, fighting against overwhelming fear. "I just want this to be over. I want my son safe." The sheriff's cruiser turned onto a dirt road that wound deep into the forest, surrounding Whispering Pines Lake. After several miles of increasingly rough terrain, a small weathered cabin appeared through the trees. Sarah's blue Honda was parked outside, the only vehicle in sight. "Wait in the car until I clear the scene," Carter instructed, but Jennifer was already throwing open her door, maternal instinct overriding caution. "Ethan!" she called, running toward the cabin. The door opened before she reached it, and Sarah appeared, her expression a mixture of relief and confusion. "Jennifer, what's happening? You sounded terrified on the phone." "Where's Ethan?" Jennifer demanded, brushing past her friend into the cabin's dimly lit interior. "Mom!" Ethan's voice came from a small back room. He emerged with a fishing magazine in hand, Scruffy bounding ahead to greet Jennifer with enthusiastic relief. Jennifer swept her son into her arms, clutching him so tightly he squirmed in protest. "Are you okay? Has anyone been here? Anyone at all?" Just the ranger, Sarah said, watching Sheriff Carter enter with his hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. He stopped by about an hour ago to check fishing licenses. Standard procedure around here. Carter and Robert exchanged sharp glances. What ranger? Carter asked carefully. Tall guy, dark uniform. Said he was making routine checks of occupied cabins, Sarah explained. Is something wrong? There are no ranger patrols scheduled in this area today, Carter said quietly, drawing his weapon. When exactly did he leave? A floorboard creaked in the back room where Ethan had been. Jennifer instinctively pulled her son behind her as a man in a park ranger uniform emerged, his stance casual, but his eyes cold and evaluating. I didn't, he said simply. Just taking a little rest before continuing my rounds. Jennifer recognized the calculated look in his eyes, the same predatory assessment she'd seen in Walsh's gaze. Sheriff Carter leveled his weapon. Hands where I can see them. The false ranger smiled, raising his hands with exaggerated slowness. Just doing my job, officer. Your name and ID, Carter demanded. Ranger Phillips, Whispering Pines District, the man replied smoothly, maintaining his facade. My identification's in my breast pocket. May I? Carter nodded cautiously, keeping his weapon trained on the man. As Phillips reached toward his pocket, Jennifer noticed his eyes dart toward the window, as if gauging distances and escape routes. Robert, she whispered. He's going to run. Robert had already positioned himself near the side door, anticipating the same conclusion. Sarah stood frozen near the kitchen, her earlier confusion hardening into fear as she realized the danger. The next few seconds unfolded with chaotic precision. The moment the fake ranger's hand emerged from his pocket, holding not identification but something metallic that caught the light. Sheriff Carter shouted a warning. The man pivoted with unexpected agility, shouldering through the side window in a shower of glass and splintered wood before Carter could fire. Stay here, Carter ordered Jennifer, already moving to pursue. Robert was faster, having anticipated the escape attempt. He intercepted the fleeing man at the tree line, tackling him to the ground in a controlled takedown that spoke of military training. The false ranger fought with desperate strength, landing a solid blow to Robert's jaw before Carter arrived to assist. From the cabin window, Jennifer watched the struggle, shielding Ethan's eyes from the violence. Sarah stood beside them, her arm around Jennifer's shoulders. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. You couldn't have known, Jennifer assured her, though her heart still raced at how close the danger had come to her son. Sheriff Carter led the handcuffed imposter back toward the cabin, his expression grave. John Mercer, he identified the man. Former cellmate of Gregory Walsh, wanted in 3 states for fraud and assault. The false ranger, Mercer, maintained a defiant silence, though his earlier smooth confidence had evaporated. When Scruffy approached, growling low in his throat, Mercer flinched visibly. That mutt should be put down, he muttered. Ruined everything the first time around. Jennifer realized with a chill that this man must have been present during Ethan's original abduction, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. You were there that night, she stated, voice shaking with anger. You helped Gregory Walsh try to take my son. Mercer's silence and averted gaze confirmed her suspicion. Sheriff Carter tightened the handcuffs a notch, perhaps more forcefully than strictly necessary. We'll sort out the details at the station, Carter said. The important thing is everyone's safe now. As a second patrol car arrived to transport Mercer, Jennifer gathered Ethan and Scruffy close, the reality of what had almost happened settling over her like a physical weight. This man had been moments away from taking her son. Again. Is it really over this time? She asked Robert quietly as they watched the patrol car disappear down the dirt road. Robert's expression remained vigilant, despite their apparent victory. Walsh and Mercer were the main threats, but we should remain cautious until the prosecutor confirms there weren't other accomplices. Later that evening, Back at Jennifer's house with a deputy stationed outside, the emotional weight of the day finally caught up with her. Ethan had fallen asleep on the couch with Scruffy protectively curled beside him, both exhausted from the ordeal. "You should rest too," Robert suggested gently. "It's been an extraordinarily difficult day." Jennifer nodded, though she doubted sleep would come easily. "I keep thinking about how close we came to losing him again. If Sarah hadn't been suspicious about that phone call." "But she was," Robert reminded her. "And Ethan is safe. That's what matters." Sheriff Carter called around midnight with confirmation that Mercer had confessed to working with both Walsh brothers. The network had been small, but determined, limited to the 3 men with no other accomplices identified. "The prosecutor is confident this concludes the threat to your family," Carter reported, "though we'll maintain protective monitoring for a few more days as a precaution." After hanging up, Jennifer felt the first tentative threads of genuine relief begin to unwind the constant tension she'd carried for weeks. She checked on Ethan once more before heading to her own room, pausing to straighten a photo frame on the entryway table. The motion disturbed an envelope she hadn't noticed before. No postmark, no address, just her name written in shaky handwriting that seemed vaguely familiar. A chill ran through her as she realized it hadn't been there when they'd returned home. Jennifer stared at the unmarked envelope, fingers trembling as she reached for it. She recognized the handwriting immediately, having seen similar penmanship on the notes and annotations covering Robert's wall of missing children. Jennifer's hands trembled as she carefully opened the unmarked envelope, preparing herself for yet another threat. The paper inside was simple-lined stationery, folded precisely. She unfolded it, noting the same shaky handwriting that covered the inside. "Dear Mrs. Wilson, you don't know me, but I know you. 7 years ago, Robert Miller saved my daughter from a man who had taken 3 other children. The police had given up, but Robert hadn't. He found patterns they missed. When Katie came home, I asked how I could repay him. He only asked that I help others if the chance ever came. When I saw your story on the news, I recognized Robert standing in the background. I knew he would be helping you too. He never stops watching over the children he saves. Your son is fortunate to have both you and Robert fighting for him. Some of us weren't as lucky as you, but knowing people like you and Robert exist gives us hope. With gratitude, Ellen Markham." Jennifer sat heavily on the entryway bench, relief washing through her. Not a threat, a thank you. Not from a stalker, but from someone whose life Robert had touched, just as he had touched hers. She reread the letter, noting the details. Robert had never mentioned other children he'd helped find, though it explained so much about his vigilance, his obsession with missing children cases. She was still holding the letter when Robert arrived the next morning, toolbox in hand for the final touches on Scruffy's new doghouse. "I got a letter," Jennifer said, extending the paper toward him. "From someone named Ellen Markham." Robert's weather-worn face revealed a flicker of recognition before returning to its usual composed expression. He accepted the letter, reading it silently before handing it back. "Katie," he said softly. 10 years old. Disappeared walking home from a friend's house. Police thought she'd run away after an argument with her mother. But you knew better, Jennifer prompted. Robert shrugged, uncomfortable with the implicit praise. I noticed a pattern of similar disappearances linked to a delivery service. The man was using his job to scout vulnerable children. He cleared his throat. Ellen was grateful. How many? Jennifer asked. How many other children have you helped find? Robert hesitated, then gestured toward his truck. Let me show you something. Inside his glove compartment was a small, worn leather album. Robert handed it to Jennifer wordlessly. She opened it to find photos, distant, respectful images of children playing in parks, walking to school, living normal lives. Each had a small date notation in the corner. These are the ones who came home, Robert explained quietly. 17 altogether, I keep track. Make sure they're still safe." Jennifer flipped through the album, recognizing in each photo what these images truly represented. Not an obsession, but a confirmation that his work mattered, that these young lives continued because of his intervention. "This is why you watch," she realized. "Not because you're fixated on tragedy, but because you're protecting them." "After James?" Robert said, the name still causing a slight catch in his voice. "I couldn't save my own son, but I could try to prevent other parents from experiencing that loss." Sheriff Carter's cruiser pulled into the driveway, interrupting their conversation. The officer appeared more relaxed than Jennifer had seen him in weeks. His perpetual frown softened. "Good news," he announced, approaching them. "The prosecutor has formally filed charges against all 3 suspects. Walsh, his brother, and Mercer are being held without bail pending trial." "That is good news," Jennifer agreed, feeling another knot of tension release. "There's more," Carter continued. "The evidence team found journals in Mercer's apartment detailing previous abduction attempts, information that will help solve cold cases in 3 counties. "Will Ethan need to testify?" Jennifer asked, the thought of her son facing his abductors in court making her stomach clench. "Not in person," Carter assured her. "His recorded statement and the physical evidence are more than sufficient. The prosecutor thinks they'll all take plea deals rather than face trial." As the sheriff left, Jennifer turned to find Ethan standing in the doorway, Scruffy at his side. The boy looked between his mother and Robert, his expression still carrying the wariness that had become habitual, but with a new undercurrent of determination. "Is it really over?" he asked quietly. Jennifer pulled him into a gentle embrace. "Yes, sweetheart. The bad men are going to prison for a very long time." 2 weeks later, Jennifer smoothed her blouse nervously as she prepared for her first day at the Westbridge Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting families of missing and exploited children. The job offer had come unexpectedly. The foundation's director had read about Ethan's case and reached out, impressed by Jennifer's resilience and advocacy for her son. The position paid substantially better than the bookstore, with flexible hours that accommodated Ethan's ongoing therapy appointments. It felt right, using her painful experience to help others navigating similar nightmares. "You have everything you need for school?" she asked Ethan, who was carefully packing his lunch. He nodded, his movements more confident than they had been in months. The nightmares hadn't stopped entirely, but they were less frequent now. Last night had been the first time he'd slept without a light on since the abduction. "Robert's picking me up after school," Ethan reminded her. "We're going to finish Scruffy's house today." Jennifer smiled at the easy way her son mentioned Robert now. The quiet veteran had become a steady presence in their lives, never pushing, always respectful of boundaries, but consistently reliable. Ethan had flourished under his calm guidance, gradually reclaiming the confidence that had been stolen from him that night. That evening, Jennifer returned home to find Robert and Ethan in the backyard, putting the final touches on an impressively constructed doghouse. Scruffy supervised from a sunny patch of grass, his tail thumping in approval. "Mom," Ethan called, spotting her. "Look what we finished." The doghouse was painted bright blue with white trim, a miniature replica of their own home, complete with a small porch and nameplate reading Scruffy's Place. "It's beautiful," Jennifer marveled, genuinely impressed by the craftsmanship. "You did this together?" "Robert showed me how to use the power tools," Ethan said proudly. "I did all the painting myself." "He's a natural," Robert added with a rare smile. "Quick learner." Over dinner, Robert's homemade lasagna had become a weekly tradition. Ethan surprised them both with a question. "Robert, do you think you could teach me how to fix other things? Like my watch?" Robert glanced at Jennifer before responding. "If your mom approves, I'd be happy to show you the basics. Everyone should know how to repair what's important to them." Jennifer watched her son's face light up with genuine enthusiasm, something she'd feared might never return after the trauma he'd endured. I think that's a wonderful idea. Later, after Ethan had gone to bed with Scruffy faithfully curled at his feet, Jennifer and Robert sat on the porch swing, mugs of tea warming their hands against the evening chill. "I've been thinking," Jennifer began hesitantly, "about what you said after finding Ethan, about some broken things being worth fixing." Robert nodded, waiting patiently for her to continue. "The Foundation director mentioned they're looking for someone to develop a children's self-defense and awareness program," she continued. "Someone with both security experience and sensitivity to trauma." Robert's expression remained neutral, though interest flickered in his eyes. "Sounds like important work." "I suggested you," Jennifer said directly. "If you're interested, your experience, both professional and personal, it could help a lot of children learn to protect themselves." "I'm not much of a teacher," Robert demurred, though he appeared thoughtful. "You taught Ethan," Jennifer pointed out. "Not just survival skills, but how to feel secure again, how to trust his instincts." She paused, gathering courage. "We could develop it together. Call it the Project Scruffy Initiative or something." For the first time since she'd known him, Robert laughed, a genuine sound of surprise and amusement. "Named after the real hero of this story?" "Exactly," Jennifer smiled. "Teaching children awareness, trust in their instincts, and that size doesn't determine courage." Their conversation continued late into the evening, ideas flowing more easily than either had expected. By the time Robert left, they had the outline of a program that could potentially help countless children avoid what Ethan had experienced. The next morning, Jennifer found herself drawn to the small box in her dresser drawer, where she'd kept the metal knife tip removed from Ethan's leg. She had preserved it as evidence, but the prosecutor had returned it after documenting it thoroughly, explaining they had stronger evidence for their case. Jennifer studied the jagged metal fragment thoughtfully. It represented everything she'd nearly lost: Ethan's safety, their sense of security, their faith in the world. Keeping it felt like preserving the trauma itself. With sudden clarity, Jennifer knew what she needed to do. That afternoon, she took Ethan and Robert to the lake, where they'd confronted the final member of the criminal network. This time, they came not in fear, but in strength, carrying fishing rods and a picnic lunch. Scruffy bounded ahead, investigating interesting smells along the shoreline. While Ethan and Robert set up their fishing gear, Jennifer walked to the end of a small wooden pier. She removed the box from her pocket, opened it one last time, then deliberately tipped the knife fragment into the deep water, watching as it disappeared beneath the surface. The weight that lifted from her shoulders was almost physical. She rejoined her son and Robert, accepting the fishing rod offered to her with a smile. Months later, Jennifer stood at her kitchen window, watching as Robert demonstrated proper measuring techniques to Ethan in the backyard. They were building birdhouses now. Ethan's idea for expanding the backyard wildlife sanctuary he'd envisioned. Scruffy raced happy circles around them, barking encouragement at their progress. Jennifer touched the wall clock, now keeping perfect time, and realized she had finally learned the difference between taking out the trash and throwing away what was precious. Some wounds, she had discovered, heal better when shared.